Isn't it amazing how God is vested in human skin? I'm so glad that we are participating in a day where the days of our spectatorship are over. I mean, we've given our support to the Sharks, brother, and always I'm in the province, I'm from the Western Province. We need all the support we can get, but what a day when we no longer just waving the flag of some team we support and holding thumbs for some great goal to be scored. But when we come to the realization that we are the trophy of God, we are His trophy.
Well done, God.
Well done, God. I mean, just look at you. Brother Sean, so happy to meet you guys. Wow, Facebook's amazing. Look at this. Facebook just... The days of boundaries and fences are over.
Yeah! Come on!
We live in the transparency of a union that began in God. It cannot be hidden. City set on a hill. Let me tell you what we've come to realize about the attraction of truth that ignites lives is irresistible. The desire of the nations fulfilled in an understanding that unfolds. Thank you, Father. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you that you've always known us. In that beautiful poem in 1 Corinthians 12, 1 Corinthians 13, Paul, thank you. He celebrates the fact that we come to know as we have always been known. You might have been a surprise to your parents, but God says, I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. You're an eternal being, and God has found unique expression of eternity packaged in you. Life is precious. Thank God for the revelation, for the unveiling of what we carry. We started this morning a little bit off into 2 Corinthians chapter 13. And I'll just read to you again just to get you excited. By the way, the mirrors we brought 50, and they unfortunately went very quickly. But we do have a list somewhere for names where you can engage with us, and then we'll post it this week. It'll come your way. Paul says here in 2 Corinthians 13 and verse 5, he says, I implore you to examine faith for yourselves in order to test what it is that you really believe. You know, one can be very sincere about one's beliefs, but one can sadly be sincerely wrong. Paul makes it so simple in Ephesians chapter 4, where he says that there is only one faith. The only faith, exactly. There is only one faith that matters. It's not what we or a million others believe or don't believe. It's what God believes. Do you know that you are the expression of God's belief? God is absolutely persuaded about you. God has never for a split second changed His mind about you. And God has done enough in His workmanship, confirmed in the expression of the incarnation, to confirm, to set His seal upon you. And when I speak about you, you might as well spell humanity differently. It's Y-O, humanity. Because it's impossible for... I mean, we had 2 children, and then we thought, you know, we might as well expand, so we bought a microbus, a 10-seater. I said, darling, no more just that way. So we had 2 more. And we had 4, and I'm sad today because my boys are so slow. My daughter's at least given us 2 children, so we've got two grandkids. No, but, I mean, there's not one moment where we as parents feel, okay, well, obliged, we've forgotten to think about Ronaldo today. So we've got to just... It's wonderful to remember one another and to do the WhatsApp thing. We've got a family. By the way, my surname, Du Toit, we've got it means in French, funny duck or duck. So we've got a funny duck of group on WhatsApp. So we're going, yeah. But I mean, it's the most natural thing to be included in a union. But then to discover that this union knows no boundaries. We've come to discover a place, a family, a oneness, where everybody on this planet is equally included because they are equally valued. Millions of multitudes of people live in blindfold mode, that's all. And we have the joy to announce that which lives in the heart. So when Paul says, I want you to examine what it is that you believe. Because we can believe all kinds of stuff that can get us on all kinds of detours. And many of us can testify of detours, of wasted days and years and months. Like Israel, 40 years in the wilderness, failing to possess the promise. So he says this here, faith is so much more than the mere veneer of a superstitious belief in an historic Christ. Faith is about realizing Jesus Christ in you. He speaks about the ore placed into a crucible where the dross is separated from the gold. In the furnace, come to the conclusion for yourselves of his indwelling. Should it appear to you that he's absent in your life, look again. You've the Etera calls him Abraham. Up, Father, Rom from above. He says, I cannot claim parenthood yet. This is a miracle. So now we go fast forward. Abraham, he gets 30, 35, no kids. He turns like 70 like his dad, hoping that it's going to happen this year at least. No. 75 years he's old. And God meets with him. And instead of, God saying, okay, what we're going to do, we're going to add a sound to your name. And the oath. I read something on. I think it's one of the commentaries on the oath principle. I so love the way it's written in Hebrews chapter 6, verse 17. Back to the RSV. I studied RSV for many years, so I'm still getting more and more familiar with the Mirror Bible. So, but in the RSV. Paul, one of his students, wrote, it came out of his ministry though, he says, God desires, I love that, God desires to show more convincingly, and I'm sure we preached that way back in Helium days, it's about 30 years ago that we last saw each other. So God desires, he still does, he desires to show more convincingly to the heirs of the promise, the what? The unchangeable character of his purpose. Do you think that some devil or demon of our imagination has what it takes to convince God to think and believe differently about humanity? Impossible. Impossible. It's a lost cause to begin with. Because God is persuaded about his purpose. We spoke about how he cancelled every definition of distance. Remember Isaiah 55? Your thoughts, not my thoughts. That's the problem. Your thoughts, not my thoughts. And then he says, as the heavens are higher than the earth, so my thoughts higher than your thoughts, and my ways are higher than your ways. So we thought, okay, what we need to do, we close the Bible then, and now we're going to go into behavioral modification programs, and we're going to help people to change their behavior, and we're going to panel beat people, and do stuff to get people to behave properly. We're wasting our time. The problem is the thinking. The next verse says, but as the rain and the snow come down from heaven to do what? To saturate the soil. Not to tease the soil with a dropje, reeds val die druppels gedeur. 'n druppeltjie en 'n druppeltjie daar. He's in the incarnation, God saturated human life. The fullness of the Godhead bodily finds space enough to tabernacle, to make it his permanent dwelling, to make it his home. You are the home, you are the address of God. Hier kom nog op en nou gaan ons dat wys. To dwell. He came to tabernacle, to inhabit humanity. There is no place in the universe where God feels more at home than in you. Emmanuel means God cannot be God without you. He didn't just come to just rub shoulders with a few humans and pick a few lucky ones. You guys come with me to him. Sorry for the rest of you. No, we're talking about God's persuasion. Hebrews 6:7. And the Father claimed parenthood over the human race. When they sing Ephesians 4 says there is only one Father. When we saw yesterday in Isaiah, a son is born, a child is a son is born, and he shall be called the everlasting Father. So God desires to show more convincingly to the heirs of the promise, the unchangeable character of his purpose. The gospel is the announcing of the certainty of God. God is not taking casual, cautious steps. He makes the boldest statement, the incarnation, the word that becomes flesh, the prophetic word that profoundly carries the promise through the ages, the mystery that was hidden for ages and generations now unfolds in flesh, incarnate, in human form, in you, unveiled in ordinary human life. And suddenly we discover there is more to me than what meets the eye. Thank God. You know what that does to competition? It takes it out of the equation. Paul writes about this in 2 Corinthians 10, verse 12. He says, while we compete and compare with one another, we miss the spot. We miss it completely. He says, we are without understanding. And we saw 1 John 5:20 that we know that the Son of God has come to do what? To give us understanding so that we may know him who is true. And here's the understanding. We are in him who is true. We're not trying to fight for a little space of it. Oh, can my son sit next to you for 5 minutes? Can we do a selfie? Can we just do something? So you're in the picture forever. You are God's picture. You are his selfie. Come on. The image and the likeness of God. beingness is wrapped up in your skin. Tabernacles of God. And in our union, in our oneness, in our one togetherness, the expression multiplies. Multiplies. So he swore by himself. So God had something that humans do. Hebrews 6:13 says, had no one greater to swear by. When he desired to add weight to the promise that was conceived in Abraham's thought, out of that dead womb, sounds like a rocked womb, Isaac, laughter will be born. So he swore by himself. And our desire is for us to be equally convinced. He says, I'm still quoting from the RSV, you see it just down. He says, men indeed swear by greater than themselves. He says, this is human practice. We understand the principle. When two parties engage in business and they see some kind of prosperous future for themselves, they want to take doubt and dispute out of the equation. So what do? They call in a higher authority. And the lawyer comes and on behalf of a greater authority, the government, this union is now sealed and it's documented. Or when marriage happens, people's lives merge and there's a seal, there's a higher authority that establishes and helps people see more weight and substance to their commitment, to their promise. And God says, men indeed swear by greater than themselves to bring an end to what? To all dispute. Imagine a conversation where there is no dispute. Sadly, the Christian community is the most divided community on the planet. You get a handful of political parties doing what they need to do, and in that same community, hundreds of churches. We've been found in Him. And our in Himness, our in Christness, is what connects us in the persuasion of God. The desire to show more convincingly. Can I just quick, I'll keep my finger, move back there, and then we're going somewhere else. But here we are. Remember, it's only 5 o'clock now. What time sunrise tomorrow morning, brother? Don't sit in windows. No, we won't keep it on. Hebrews 6, it's so beautiful in the mirror. Because it's one of my favorite verses. That's why I say, I'm sure Ian remembers it. We haven't seen, Ian was part of our team 30 years back. Over 5 years, we had about 700 young people just arrive, and things just happen in our house and in the hotel that was given to us. So we're still preaching the same beautiful gospel, my brother. Hebrews 6. I'll read verse 13. Since God had no one greater by whom to swear, He swore by Himself. He could give Abraham no greater guarantee but the integrity of his own being. This makes the promise as sure as God is. You know that in another place God says, as truly as I live, all the earth shall be flooded with the knowledge of my glory. In Isaiah 40, He makes every high place low and fills up every valley and every crooked place straight. He arrives in the wilderness, not a little footpath, in a donkey cart. You'll never be able to find this. You won't even be able to Google it. No. He sets up a highway, salvation. The salvation of the human race is the highway of God into humanity's history forever. And He says, all the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of my glory. And then in Isaiah 40 He says, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed. What's the purpose of the highway, Lord? What's salvation all about? It's for the unveiling of my glory in you. He says, you know what? All flesh shall see it together. So here we find God under oath. And verse 7:16 says, it is common practice in human affairs to evoke a higher authority under oath in order to add weight to any agreement between parties, thereby silencing any possibility of quibbling. Verse 17, in the same context, we are confronted with God's eagerness to go to the last extreme in His dealing with us as heirs of His promise, and to cancel out all possible grounds for doubt or dispute. You see, religion sold us a couple of D-lies. Distance, delay, dispute. Jesus dealt with them all, including the devils and the demons. Cancelling all possible grounds for doubt or dispute, in order to persuade us of the unalterable character and finality of His resolve, He confined Himself to an oath. The promise, which already belongs to us by heritage, is now also confirmed under oath. Verse 18, so that we are now dealing with two irreversible facts, which makes it impossible for God to be proved wrong. Thus our persuasion as to our redeemed identity is powerfully reinforced. We have already escaped into their destiny. Our expectation has come within our immediate grasp. Let's quickly just flip back to 2 Corinthians 13. So we've got here, he says, now I want you to examine faith for yourselves. And then he speaks about coming to the conclusion of his glorious indwelling. Should it appear to you that Jesus absolutely, do the test, do it again. And then he speaks about, I'll highlight in the commentary, several Greek words that has to do with examining closely. You know what I love about this kind of examination? You can zoom in as close as it gets. Remember with the replays, you know, we mentioned it in the FIFA World Cup and in our sporting disciplines, how important the TV umpire became, the third umpire, because I mean decisions, some of them are knife-edge decisions, and then you go back into replay and they zoom in and it's slow motion. Was it a try or not a try? You know, did it in the cricket the boundary? What was the goal? Was it handball involved? You know, and it because there are huge monies involved in decisions that an umpire or a referee has to make, and so with the assistance of and the aid of being able to replay the moment and relive the moment, we can zoom in. And often the guys will have to go like this and cancel the decision. They were convinced about this for one moment, and then suddenly they see their whole moment replayed, and in the replay of the moment they realize, we were wrong all along. I'm so glad that in the book of Hebrews we read that Jesus, remember, the author and finisher of faith, He is the author and finisher of faith. But I want to read this because His sameness never changed. He is the same yesterday, today, forever. I was preaching in a pastor's conference in Nairobi some years back, and we started off with that verse. And 5 days later we had to extend it with another day. They begged us to stay longer, and we just couldn't get out of the yesterday. That is sameness yesterday. How far can you go yesterday? How far can we trace human history and find again and again the sameness? I want you to know something about salvation. Your salvation is not some desperate attempt of a clumsy God who thought, well, let me try and save a few. It's very possible to underestimate the gospel, but it is impossible to exaggerate the gospel. So if you want to go wrong in your beliefs about Jesus and heaven and hell and how great a salvation we have, go wrong in the other way. We have underestimated for too long the simplicity and the power of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Paul says, I am not ashamed. He says, all of sin and fallen short. There is no distinction. They all are equally justified as a gift through the redemption and the righteousness which is in Jesus Christ. We're not trying to persuade a reluctant God to bless us. Oh Lord, bless this world. We're in a mess. No, He's desiring to persuade us of the success of the cross, so that we may behold as in a mirror, no longer as in a display window in some prophetic voice that points to some unknown future and talks stuff about end times, when Jesus is the eschatos. He's the finality of God's conversation. God has nothing more to say to this planet than what He said in Jesus. Yes, in many and various ways God spoke of old to the fathers, prophetically, in little glimpses, fragments of thought. But in the eschatos, it says in the Greek, in the eschatology of God, in these last days, Hebrews chapter 1, 2,000 years ago, He has spoken to us. Humanity, you are the audience of God, and God is persuaded about your salvation. He's come to your rescue in Jesus. Having made purification. But first, before we get there, Hebrews chapter 1 says, it is the exhibit of the character of God. He is the exhibit. Die uitstraling van die wese van God. The God of creation cannot make themselves more visible than what they did in the man Jesus Christ. God unmasked. You've seen me, you've seen the Father. And His Holy Spirit cries, Abba, Abba, Father. There's no embarrassment there. He is not ashamed to call us brethren. Part of the same family. I always cry when I read about Joseph revealing himself to his brothers. What a powerful picture of Jesus. Revealing himself to his brothers. The very ones crucified him. Revealing himself. Benjamin. I'll go back to Corinthians 13. Examining closely. Those are the words Paul employs in 2 Corinthians 13 verse 5. He says, I encourage you to examine your faith. Not your faith, the faith. The faith. So that you can be persuaded about what it is that you believe. I wrote you in my commentary to 2 Corinthians 13:5, you cannot measure temperature with a ruler. It's impossible. The law cannot measure you. You're not designed to be measured by rules and regulations. You bring rules and regulations into a marriage and you ruin the relationship, or any friendship for that matter. You bring rules and regulations into the friendship, you ruin the romance. There is no law against agape. You cannot squeeze agape into a box. Agape jumps out every time. So I said Paul uses the word perazzo to examine closely, from pera to pierce, to test, to determine the hidden value of something. Also from the word peras, which speaks of extremity or the furthest boundary. Faith is not a veneer to cover up potential depression or disappointment when faced with trying times. Note that Paul is not speaking about you putting your beliefs to the test, but you testing the faith for yourself. There is only one valid faith, not what we believe about God or about ourselves, but what God believes about us. And then he uses the word dokimatsu, as in the testing of metals. And then I wrote this powerful statement. It was an update on Facebook. I asked it several times, but listen to this. I said to you that self-examination has nothing to do with finding hidden sins and flaws in you. It is all about realizing Christ in you. The object of the furnace is not to reveal the dross, but the gold. I thank God for the Bible, but you know, we've made an idol of the Bible. The Bible is not God's word, but it certainly carries the gold. The gold is the unveiling of Christ as in a mirror in human life, in the incarnate man. God unveils the essence of his being in flesh. Oh, flesh, but that's a sinful thing. Until you discover that flesh is God's favorite place to dwell. Come on, when you fall in love, you don't have to go to kissing school, do you? What feels romantic about you? He's head over heels in it. He desires you. He desires to show more convincingly, to bring an end to all dispute. Every possible argument, yes, but what about this scripture? What about that? And I can bring a million scriptures. But the word is Jesus incarnate, unveiled in you. I'm addicted to the Bible, but I do not make this book my idol. Because it's just unveiling the most powerful mystery. The mystery that was hidden for ages and generations. Oh, but you've got to examine yourself before you come to the table. Yes, you need you to. But examine. To come to what conclusion? Christ in you. Let me just continue reading. The object of the furnace is not to reveal the dross of the gold. Christ himself is the proof of faith. He is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Hebrews 11 verse 1. The test of truth is foolproof. He says in verse 8, we can do nothing against the truth, only for the truth. And you know what I love about the word truth? We spoke about it yesterday, my brother. We were asking a question about truth. Truth, in the Greek, the word truth means unveiled. Truth is simply that which is unveiled. But now Paul says the truth in Ephesians chapter 4. He says the truth as it is in Christ. Because Jesus says, I am the truth about you. The truth about you is not someone else's gossip or opinion or applause. The proof about you is not your idea about yourself. It's God's idea about you. And He's dealing with you to persuade you so that you can be equally persuaded about you. Don't get your feet dancing. Come on. We have wonderful friends there in the Free State. And I tell the story everywhere I go. Linda's now writing a children's book about the story of the Notier family. Way back, now we live in the ostrich area in Oostpoortsoor, and we don't live in ostriches in our farm that they kick. Anyway, so as a skoppenigger. But this is a true story. There was a farmer in those days, one of the wealthiest in South Africa. I'm talking 80, 90 years ago, in the peak of the ostrich season, where an ostrich feather would buy more than an ounce of gold. Per weight, yeah. So he was engaged to this lady to marry her, and they had abundance. So they had a horse cart, gold-plated, and they were just mixed with the important people they thought, you know, almost like members of parliament. I mean, they would go for the who's who in society. And during their engagement, she had an encounter with Jesus. This was not approved of by her husband-to-be. This man thought, well, this is not good for business. You know, this girl's just joking about Jesus, and a little bit odd now. So he broke the engagement. And she landed up in the Free State. And she married what was then called a bywoner. A man who worked on someone's farm at the mercy of the farmer. He had nothing. He just worked for the farmer. She married this man. Can you imagine the amazing adjustment from wealthy beyond limits to being a farm worker? 7 years later, they were put into a position, I don't know how to check the facts here, but it was a situation where the farmer absolutely just loved them, and he made it possible for them to buy the farm. And they bought the farm. And within a short time, a few months after they took transfer, and title to this property, it was a maize farm. But there was a knock on the door, a geologist in the area brought them a confirmation that there is gold on their farm.
Wow.
And she wrote a document. In that time she said, you know, for many years we have only seen this land as a maize farm. That was it. And it was always measured by whether we had a good year or a bad year. That was the determined value of this property. She said, maar die boere het te vlak geploeg. We missed the treasure. Reminds so much of that beautiful parable of Jesus in Matthew 13:44. He says the kingdom of, I remember Jesus speaking to a bunch of Jews, they're farmers, they're businessmen. He says, the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure that is hidden in an agricultural field. An agricultural field speaks of a cultivated piece of land. This field has an historic value attached to it. When you buy a farm, you at least want to have some kind of reference to what can I expect you? What kind of produce can I expect you? How many vats of wine if you're in the Western Cape? Or how many, liters of milk and how many livestock, graze on this piece of land. So there's a very real, determined value by represented by this piece of land. Then Jesus goes on with the story and he says, but a man discovers the treasure. And now the eyes lit up. These Jewish guys, they're in for a bargain. We want to know more about this. There's a man who discovers a treasure in an agriculture. And if this field represents the human race, it's a rather neglected, overgrown with thorns and thistles piece of land. It maybe have some potential, but the treasure changes the entire picture. There's a hidden treasure that this field carries. And now we need not worry about, we hope we have a better year next year, so that we can overcome last year's loans against, the drought-stricken times, and we're waiting for another bumper crop to just lift us, by our good laces, so we can just make another season. No, your land carries gold. But now Jesus disappoints. He tells them, you can read it, Matthew 13:44. The man who finds the treasure in the agricultural field hides it again. Okay, this man has a plan. He is in the unique position to go to the marketplace and offer them a very discounted value against that farm. Because nobody else knows about the treasure. Everybody else judged this piece of land for generations as a maize-producing land. And then they've had their highs and their lows, and that's it. That's what you buy. It comes with a risk, and you can ask any farmer. Farming is a huge risk. But thank God for farmers who produce food. But that's not our story tonight. So they think, why would this man hide the treasure again? Obviously, because he's going to go to the market, and say, excuse me, but that piece of land has been in the market for a long time, I will offer you an apple and an A. I will offer you just for you to get it off your books, just to get rid of it. Jesus shocks these Jews. Totally disappoints their expectation. This man who found the treasure where it was hidden for ages and generations all along And what does this man do? He goes away and he sells all that he has and he buys the entire field. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and those who dwell in it. There is not a spot on some remote island that is not equally valued in the economy of God. He is convincing, he's desiring to persuade more convincingly the heirs of the promise. We don't need to ask for our daily bread. Jesus fulfilled that answer, that prayer. You go back to Psalm 2 today. I've begotten you. Ask me for the nations. And behold, I've given you the ends of the earth as your inheritance. God's property with him, as we're talking about. He sells all he has. He buys the entire field. You see, you don't buy from a thief. At no point, in no court of law, does a thief ever become owner. John didn't make a mistake when he wrote in John chapter 1. He came to his own. But his own received him not. Luke 15. The shepherd didn't go and look for some sheep that didn't really belong to him. 1 equals the same value in God's estimate. The individual matters to God. He went and sought until he found it. Lost sheep, lost coin, lost son, all found safe and sound. That's the gospel. We have reduced the gospel to a distant future afterlife thing, while God's been persuaded all along about his glory flooding the earth as the waters cover the sea. If we failed for 2,000 years as a church to do what we were called to do, then we are in the same ranks as Israel was, totally freed from Pharaoh, but lost in a desert of unbelief. The entire world is waiting to hear the gospel, the good news that the engineer of the universe, whose idea I am, you are, has stepped in flesh. Not in a Spider-Man suit, but born through the womb of a mother in human skin. And in the genius of God, he sold all he had and bought what already belonged to him. Why? Because he desires more, to show more convincingly. So he enters into an oath. Not to persuade him, but to persuade us. Jesus didn't die to change God's bad mood about mankind. Jesus didn't die saying, well, I'll just take the bullet, I'm just going to do it. And if I'm not going to do it, my Father's going to blow you away. God was in Christ when he reconciled. When Jesus quoted Psalm 22, when he said, my God, Eli, lama sabachthani, why have you forsaken me? And on the cross he cries this out. The Jews think, Psalm 22. Exactly. He wants to draw their attention to the prophetic word that carried the promises of womb. Jesus was not forsaken by God. You can go and read the rest of that psalm. He says, not for one moment will I forsake you. But he went into our God-forsakenness. Yes. He went into our darkness, into our hell. Yes. And he came back with the keys. The gates of Hades shall not prevail against you. You discover that the Son of Man is the Son of God. We did not begin in our mother's womb. We are original. You are original. In the beginning was the word face to face with God. There is nothing more original than the Logos of God. It became flesh. The gospel unveils and masks you. We were introduced to ourselves again.
Very good.
As he is, so are we. In this world. What is true of him, which John writes there. Remember, he's 90 years old, the man now, so he suddenly became literate. He began to write. He says, I'm writing this so that your joy may be full. He says, what we've heard, but was once just rumors. I've just got to read this to you. It's so beautiful. 1 John 1. Oh my Jesus. 1 John 1, he says this. He says, oh, now let me read to Johannes. He's going to go out the way. I'll say 1 John 1. The Logos, verse 1 John 1, verse 1. The Logos is the source. Everything commences in him. The initial reports concerning him that have reached our ears, and which we indeed bore witness to with our own eyes, to the point that we became irresistibly attracted, now captivates our gaze. In him we witness tangible life in its most articulate form. In the RSV translation, the reports that we heard, that we've seen, that we beheld and touched. Psalo is the word touch. To touch the strings. That's why when you go into these shops, you know, in the old days, where they displayed all these wonderful, expensive articles, it says, don't touch. Because why? When you see something beautiful, you spontaneously reach out, you want to touch because you want to own it. You feel, can I just touch this? Can I just... What? And in our imagination, we've done our window shopping. Thought, I wonder what I would look like in this dress or shoes or behind the steering wheel. And you kind of imagine. And we've been in display window mode for centuries, deceiving ourselves. And all along the veil was torn. So that we now may all of us, with unveiled faces, behold, not some geological report, some theological idea about a possible you. We're not talking about some conditional idea about you. We're talking about already disarmed principalities and powers. But here we go with our doctrines, and we empower a defeated devil. We preach a defeated devil back into business. And it's good business in the whole Christian scene all over the globe. Come on, zoom in on the devil's word. Let's zoom in. Paul says the old things have passed away. Behold, everything has become new. We are the resurrection generation. That lovely song we sang somewhere yesterday, chosen generation. We can fit the word resurrection generation in there. We are the resurrection generation. Because Peter, even Peter gets it. Come on. The old brother was a fisherman. Eventually he writes, he begins his writing 1 Peter 1 verse 3. He says, we were born anew when Jesus was raised from the dead. What was it last? 1 John. The same life, verse 2, that was face to face with the Father from the beginning has now dawned on us. The infinite life of the Father became visible before our eyes in a human person. He says in verse 3, we include you in this conversation. You are the immediate audience of the logic of God. This is the Word that always was. We saw Him incarnate and witnessed His language as defining our lives. In the incarnation, Jesus includes humanity in the eternal friendship of the Father and the Son. This life now finds expression in unreserved union. Unreserved union. Unreserved union. Verse 4, what we enjoy equally belongs to you. I am so glad. Neither Paul, Peter, John, any of these guys wrote something that made them some kind of unique, exclusive group. Peter writing, well, you know, I was with him on that glorious mountain. Eyewitness. I heard the voice. Sorry about you guys. You're going to have to have the second hand. 2 Peter chapter 1. We didn't get there, but we started on it this morning. He says, you will do well. He says, I will make sure, Peter, I will make sure that after my departure, you will be able at any time to recall these things. Paul writes in Ephesians 3 verse 4 somewhere. He says, when you read this, you will receive my insight. John says, I'm writing this to you so that your joy may be complete. I'm writing this for your reference so that joy may be yours in its most complete measure. Wow. This is the real deal. I read verse 5. My conversation with you flows from the same source which illuminates this fellowship of union with the Father and the Son. This then is the essence of the message. God is radiant light, and in Him there exists not even a trace of obscurity or darkness at all. This is the real deal. The life of pretense is such a waste of time. The truth has no competition. Truth inspires the poetry of friendship in total contrast to a fake performance-based fellowship. Light is not threatened by darkness. Why say something with darkness as your reference? That takes a lot of conversation out of the equation.
Yeah.
Have your minds flooded with good news. Imagine a conversation that echoes the logos, the word that was before time was. And people knock on your door, dial your number, go to your Facebook page. It's like going to a favorite restaurant. You don't expect to buy Kentucky at McDonald's or whatever it is. I'm just using names that shouldn't be our favorite foods because fast foods are not good for you. Go for that which is good for your body. Anyway, but if you're in a rush, so don't make it your diet. Don't make it your diet. You know that the only piece of furniture in the temple, prophetically, profoundly, was the table. The daily bread on it. The table is a celebration. Every time you eat and drink, you celebrate the incarnation. Food becomes flesh, and I'll tell you what, we had some decent Durban. Ha ha! Mutton curry. Dat was een lekker goeie saam met dit. Rotis and mutton curry. I'll tell you what, rotis and mutton curry become flesh. That mutton is now upgraded in human life. The incarnation, thoughts become flesh. The word is destined to find a voice beyond the page. Yes. Thank God for the page. Yes. But the incarnation is the most accurate translation. Yes. Where the word translates into human life. Yes. Menswees is waar het gaan vir God. Yes. Menswees. God's not embarrassed about your body. Don't spoil God's smile over you. Danses over you with joy. Is God se liefde in 'n lyf. Die woord kry lief vir jou. Isn't it amazing that we're designed for the word to find expression, exhibit in ordinary human life? The field didn't suddenly change shape and oh, now we're going to grow a mountain here and a forest there. No. The gold defined and defines the field. And Jesus persuaded those stubborn old Jews that, listen, I want to persuade you that there is more to you than what meets your eye or your historic reference even. There is more to you than Abraham. There is more to you than Moses. I want you to discover yourselves humanity in my design, in what lengths I was prepared to go to, what extremities the genius of God went into the scandalous language of the cross to bring an end to the failing sacrificial system of man trying to manage moody monster gods of our imaginations. He went and he sold all he had. So who did he buy us from? It's not the devil. He didn't negotiate with no devil to get a discounted price for having you back. Because remember, they're my property from the beginning. And now you've gone and messed things up, and now I'm going to have to arm wrestle the devil. No, that's not the deal. He got kicked out. Don't read Revelation 12 in the Middle Bible or in any Bible. I mean, he calls him the devil, the old serpent, the dragon, whatever name you've attached to this thing. No presence was found of it in the heavenlies. Well, don't waste your time with binding demons and strong men over cities and pour oil around. Come on, when you find Jesus, do this. Any of the disciples. We've developed all kinds of magic in our doctrines. This seems to work. I mean, Pharaoh's magicians, they would outdo it and outstrip us again. Ooh, I mean, listen, signs and wonders are wonderful, but only when they follow the gospel.
Yeah. Amen.
The supernatural is not proof of faith.
Yeah.
For 40 years, a lost generation, lost in their unbelief. In their unbelief. They died because of unbelief. Why? Because they did not believe the truth about themselves. They believed that the image of God was now dwarfed into grasshopper status. We are grasshoppers. And there are giants out there. And the more we think and talk about the giant, the larger he grows.
Wow.
Thank God for the gospel. The great announcement. God is convinced. He's absolutely persuaded. Okay, well, I was quickly going to go to 1 John 2. I'll just read it because I want to go somewhere else. 1 John 2 verse 7. In verse... Well, I'm not going to read it. It's going to be too tempting to preach from. It's just where John writes. He says, this is not a new doctrine. This is not a new law that we package in in-house language. He says, it is the word that was from the beginning. It's not a modern move of God. We call it the grace movement. No. This is the word that was from the beginning. But what makes it new, John? Because he says, yet it is new. This is the word that was from the beginning, yet it is new. Go and read 1 John 2, verse 7 and 8. And ask the brother, John, I don't want to understand, I want to follow it. How can that which is old now be new? He tells us, it is everything that is true of him. Is true of you. You haven't heard it like that before. In chapter 4, verse 17 says, as he is, so are we. Or in the afterlife, you know, we're going to do our thing on harps and clouds. In this life. In this life. In this life. As he is, so we are.
Yes.
Oh, if we can awaken and scrutinize the faith for ourselves. Come on. Do you not realize that Jesus Christ is in you?
Yes.
So when you wake up in the mornings, you kind of, hello, Jesus. And you stare in your own eyes. And you hear deep calling unto deep.
Yes.
And there's an intimate embrace of oneness. Seamless union. Unreserved union. The romance of the ages is what this book is all about. And if we read Revelation wrong like we did for centuries, we're not going to get the romance.
Yeah.
We continue in blindfold mode when he brought all judgment to an end. Let me just read a little one sentence out of the introduction to their notes on the City Bride. Ooh, don't go there. Yeah. Oh, Jesus. the significance. Okay, I'll just read the first little paragraph of the introduction to the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation is the unveiling of Jesus Christ as the great rescuer of the human race. As the slain and risen Lamb of God, he fulfilled humanity's destiny with death and judgment. The significance of the implications of this cannot be exaggerated. Yes, we can underestimate the gospel. But remember Jesus' reference to the Queen of the South, who arrived after she followed up the rumors about this wealthy, wise king in a desert land. Jesus, the half has not been told. Jesus is greater than Solomon is coming. How can we exaggerate such a great salvation? I encourage you, I challenge you, my precious audience, to engage your thoughts with this great salvation. Don't put philosophical restrictions that you've borrowed from other people's ideas upon a gospel that announces humanity's redeemed innocence. We begin there. We're not on some journey trying to get to a higher level of innocence, of consciousness. No, we are redeemed as innocent as the Lamb is. The Lion of Judah, clothed in lambskin, redeeming the property of God. So Jesus persuades the Jews. He says, the man found the treasure and hid it again. Goes away. He sells all he has. Buys the entire field. Because in God's estimate, the field is worth all he has. When the businessman goes to that extreme, then what he redeems, what he buys, is all he has. God has no other interest in the universe, the human race. Wow. You know how it changes your prayer life? When you realize you don't have to waste time trying to shout God down, you know, to throw a blessing here and a blessing there and bind the devil there and curse somebody there. What a waste of time! And we can see ourselves seated together, embraced in union. Say, oh my God. Paul's only request was, when you pray for me, pray that utterance may be given me every time I open my mouth, so that I may know how to speak this mystery as I ought to. He saw such value in the unfolding of the mystery of the ages. He didn't want people to say, oh yes, but what about this and what about that? He says, I want this mystery to make every question mark an exclamation mark.
Yes,
So son, your spirit leaps and says, it's better than what I thought.
Yes.
God's gooder than what my theology allowed him to be.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
He's better than the best dad in the universe, on the planet. He's the dad of the universe. Just talking about the deal, selling all he had. I'll just read you a reference in Peter. 1 Peter 1. You take your time, read the entire chapter, but I'll just try and jumble that. And just go to verse 18. It is clear, listen to this, it is clear to see that you were ransomed from the futile, fallen mindset that you inherited from your fathers, not by the currency of your own labor. You see, in the legalistic mindset of the Jew, they could easily account to their performance against the Ten Commandments. But now James messes with us a bit when he says that I might be faithful to my wife, but I've murdered somebody. He says, you know what happens then? My faithfulness to my wife does not balance the scales. You are in one department and the entire legalistic system now comes against you. It becomes a document that is held a witness against you. And what was nailed to the cross? The Lion of Judah, taking upon himself human form as the Lamb. The entire theme of the book of Revelation is the slain lamb. The Greek uses a little frail lamb, standing as if slaughtered, but alive. Because God endorses in the throne of God, God's righteousness. God endorses the innocence of the human race, redeemed. And every prophetic picture that is brought to mind in the book of Revelation is connected to the Jewish prophetic language. I mean, you go and read Revelations 4. It's a carbon copy, thank you, of Ezekiel chapter 1. And the Jews are familiar with this language. So when they hear this, they see the same throne and the glorious living beings with the face of a man and the face of a lion and an eagle and a sacrificial animal, a little animal, says the Greek. But they are shocked, because when you turn the page in Ezekiel, you walk straight into the judgments. But the revelation of Jesus Christ is all about the slain lamb. Now is the hour. Now is the judgment of this world, he says in John 12. Now is the ruler of this world cast down. There is no more accusation, satanos, accusation, out of the equation. How can we participate in a romance where there's a constant reference to some kind of accusation? Oh, you really failed me today, didn't you? What a lie we brought in to insult the world. In holy Bibles from great pulpits. Thank God that His word is written in human consciousness. When you hear the word, not the letter of the law that kills, freedom comes to you. I always tell people, if you want to judge teaching, judge it by how the specific teaching you sit under fulfills the entire law. And what is Jesus' summary of the entire law? Loving the Lord your God with all your mind from time to time, with all your heart, with all your soul, with your entire being. And we think, okay, well, that's we'll try. But we have, and we failed. And then he adds something to the equation. The rest of the law. He says, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. And a lot of people don't even get past loving themselves. How can I love somebody that is worthless and a wicked old sinner and it's going to be a disappointment? No. It was impossible to fulfill the law. But in the unveiling, unveiled faces, where the temple is unveiled as the throne room of God. You're falling in love with the one who loved you first. Becomes a new reality. You're falling in love with people. From now on, therefore, I no longer know anyone according to the flesh. Paul could only come to that conclusion in 2 Corinthians 5:16 because he begins verse 14 of 2 Corinthians 5 with the agape of God. Soon echoes me. It is a resonation. It resonates in your being. The agape of God. You see, God's agape is not some kind of pity that He feels for people from time to time. God's agape is connected with God's esteem of you. Yes, we esteemed Him not. But that's not the point. He esteems us. And He esteemed us enough to go to the extreme of the cross. And into our idea, every definition of hell. And He released the prisoners, and He led us as His trophies in His triumphant procession on high. And Paul quotes Psalm 69. You can go and read in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 8 and 9. And he says, in Adam in the Hebrew, in the Greek, in Adam, in and by virtue of the incarnation, God unveils His gift. Oh my, we are in 1 Peter 1. Verse 18. We were ransomed from the futile and fallen mindset that we inherited from our fathers. Not by the currency of our own labor, which is the currency of the Lord. represented by the fluctuating values of gold and silver and the economy of our own religious efforts. This makes religion mad because it puts them out of business.
Yeah.
But you were redeemed with the priceless blood of Christ. He is the ultimate sacrifice, spotless and without blemish. He completes the prophetic picture. Spotless and without blemish. Spotless and without blemish. You know those shepherds that heard the message first? Why were they so good at shepherding the flock? Because their job was to make sure that their flock would not get any kind of blemish because it will kill its market value. They had to make sure, because in the prophetic picture of the sacrifice, the Passover lamb, every once a year, with the Passover feast, it was the job of the priest to scrutinize the person who brought the lamb. No, the lamb. To be spotless and blemish. You see, God wants us to perceive an image. Thank you. Of how far He was prepared to go to redeem our innocence. There is no commodity, can we call it that, in the universe that carries more value in God's estimate. It's our innocence. We saw this morning in our picture of the choir conductor. And we've been granted all things that it takes to make life, to live life to the full.
Yeah.
But those who lack these things have what? They become blind and short-sighted. Why? Because they've forgotten about their innocence. So if my innocence consciousness is now replaced with a sin consciousness, which is the old currency of the old religious efforts of man, then suddenly I'm back to square one, eating the fruit of the wrong tree again. But am I participating in the tree of life? Every moment becomes an endorsement of the innocence that Jesus redeemed. I'm not living towards a more innocent life, a more blameless, trying to get 5 out of 10 this time by Wednesday when it comes to the law. But I'm living in His innocence. And His innocence reinforces my being, defines my being. He says, I've been rescued, redeemed with the priceless blood of Christ. He's the ultimate sacrifice without blemish. He completes the prophetic picture. Now let me quickly read the commentary note. It's short. It says, in Him, this is my commentary on 1 Peter 1, verse 19. God speaks the most radical scapegoat language of the law of judgment and brings final closure to a dead and redundant system. In Psalm 40, verse 6 and 7, it is clearly stated that God does not require sacrifices or offerings. God does not need a sacrifice. Jesus is the Lamb of God. I mean, John shocks the entire system when he points at his cousin out and he says, behold, the Lamb of God. In their entire historic reference, it was always their lamb that made the difference, they hoped. It was their lamb. We have to, buy time. It's a prophetic thing, but they missed the picture, they missed the moment. They're still waiting for some appearance of, like many of us are just into this like second coming mode now. Oh, Jesus failed the first time, but His second coming is going to do it. Parousia. Parousia, we sadly translate this, future to future reference. Para in me, His most immediate I amness. His most immediate presence. Oh, you'll see it in the references here. Okay, I'll just finish reading here. He collides victoriously with a futile sacrificial system whereby offerings are constantly made to pseudo, moody monster God or gods of our imagination. This is the scandal of the cross. God does not demand a sacrifice that would change the way He thinks about you. He provides the sacrifice of Himself in Christ in order to forever eradicate sin consciousness from our minds and radically change the way we think about our Maker and one another and ourselves. Sin consciousness is in essence a work-based consciousness. God did not clothe Adam with the skin of a slain animal because of a divine need, or the skin of an animal because of a divine need to be appeased, but because of their unconditional love for Adam. They spoke the language of Adam's own judgment. Adam, not God, was embarrassed about his nakedness. The clothing was not to make God look at Adam differently, but to make Adam feel better about himself. And ultimately, it was to prophetically prepare the Adamic race for the unveiling of the mystery of humanity's redemption in the incarnation. Here, deity would clothe themselves in human skin, in a son. And the Lion of Judah would become the Lamb of God, in order to free our minds to rediscover His image, His likeness in our skin. I close with one more thought. Let me just page to Philippians chapter 2. Zet my water. I'm tempted to just now do it. I'll just quickly go to chapter 1. Because we looked at 2 Corinthians, we started off with 2 Corinthians 13. This examining yourself. The idea of the self-examination is not to reveal dross, but to reveal the gold. And now we've got it repeated here in Philippians chapter 1. I'll read you from verse 9. Paul says, this is so beautiful, verse 8. He says, God knows my intense longing for you. It is with the tender affections of Jesus Christ. It is my desire for each one of you that the realization of love's completeness in you will increasingly burst through all boundaries, and that every sphere of your relationship with others will be greatly impacted by your intimate acquaintance with love. Verse 10, I urge you to examine this agape love. You see, it's the same examination. You're examining the faith. But how does the faith work? Faith worketh by love.
Yeah.
I always say that part of King James was translated in Cape Town. Want daar praat hy so van die Torah. But faith worketh by love. Faith worketh by love. Come on. It's love that puts faith in motion. Not us trying to wind up positive thinking. I'm going to be more positive about myself. You're going to fail. But encounter agape that has a reference to value. To value. To value. God doesn't love you because He tries to be nice. He knows your value.
Yeah.
There's nothing recorded in the historic reference of the human race in all its distortions that can distract God. He still desires to show more convincingly to the heirs of the promise the unchanging character of His purpose. Examine love. He says in verse 10, Philippians 1, I urge you to examine this agape love with the utmost scrutiny. You see, you can go into replay mode here, and you can go and zoom in and zoom out. That's what I love doing about the Mirror Bible. I take words and I just zoom in and I go where theologians fear to tread. Let's go. I was kicked out of theology way back 40 years ago. Anyway, getting verse 10. I urge you to examine this agape love with the utmost scrutiny. Just like when a diamond, listen to this, just like when a diamond is viewed in the full sunlight to prove its flawless perfection. Not like, okay, now, sorry guys, we're going to have to now before we partake at the table, we've got communion today, so we're going to make sure that we're going to just zoom in the light of God's Spirit, and He's going to show you all the flaws in your life. It's not, that is the disgraceful gospel. So we've underestimated such a great salvation. It was handed over, as Paul in 4:25. He was handed over because of our transgressions. And he was raised because of our innocence. God appointed a day and a person, and on that day, in that person, God judged the world righteous. And He's given proof of this by raising Jesus from the dead. The body on the cross is the document of guilt. The open grave, the risen Christ, is the receipt. When you've purchased something expensive and you walk out of the store and you're pushing your trolley, whatever it is, you don't look at the security guards and think, oh, I'm going to have to dodge and dive this one. Like this guy, someone WhatsApped me the other day about this guy who won a race. He comes home with this new watch. And so his wife says, so where did you get this watch? Says, I won it in a race. She says, who competed? Well, I, the owner of the watch, and 3 policemen. It's like me driving and you're okay, and there's a speed cop. Oh, you know what I mean? There's guilt consciousness. We go to church, guilt consciousness, sin consciousness, because sin consciousness is the currency of religion. It's how religion makes its money. It sells its lies about ourselves. All this distance, brother. He cancelled distance. Every definition of distance. Oh, but there's some delays, you'll have to wait and see. No, you say there yet 4 months, then comes the harvest. You're waiting for the wrong harvest because you'll eat your own bread of your own labor and you'll be hungry again. But lift up your eyes. I want to show you another harvest. It is already ripe. It is already ripe. Come on. What are we waiting for? He cancelled dispute. He cancelled. He took dispute out of the equation. Oh yes, but come on, don't waste your time on Facebook defending doctrines.
Yeah.
Jesus did not come to this planet to defend doctrines, to win the doctrinal debate. He came to win hearts. He came to win hearts. And He did. Yes, love wins. Oh my. I dare you. Now listen to this. Can I read it again? Just like when a diamond is viewed in the full sunlight to prove its flawless perfection, I dare you to take love to its ultimate conclusion. There is no offense in love.
Yeah.
As evidenced in Jesus Christ, who is the light of day. You have been fully furnished with the harvest of your redeemed innocence and righteousness, for which Jesus Christ labored. This is what the glorious intent of God is all about. Celebrating. Celebrating. Take love to its ultimate conclusion. God is absolutely convinced about the salvation of the human race. If all God wanted was us in heaven one day, then why did He place us on this planet? God is as determined now as He always was for eternity to flood the earth with the knowledge of His glory. Don't waste your time praying for a revival that God owes us. Oh God, just tear open the heavens and send us a revival like you did in those days. You are the revival carrier of God.
Yeah.
Your innermost being.
Yeah.
You carry the very resources of God within you. Out of your innermost being, rivers of living waters will gush forth and flood the earth so that all flesh will see His glory.
Yeah.
Because when people encounter you, they encounter Him.
Yeah.
They encounter the Holy Spirit.
So good.
They encounter Jesus. They encounter the Father. In His warm embrace.
Wow.
Let's
So
not
good.
waste the day.
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful is Jesus. So let me just read chapter 2. I was on my way to chapter 2. We're almost through, brother. We're almost through. So verse 8 says, You can read the rest of Philippians 2, but I'm just jumping on verse 8. And so we have the drama of the cross. If you read from verse 7. His mission, however, was not to prove his deity, but to embrace our humanity. Emptied of his reputation as God, he fully embraced our physical human form. Born in our resemblance, he identified himself as the servant of the human race. His love enslaved him to us. He cannot get you out of his mind. His mind full of you. And so we have, verse 8, and so we have the drama of the cross. In context, the man Jesus Christ, who is fully God, becomes fully man to the extent of willingly dying humanity's death at the hands of his own creation. He embraced the curse and shame of the lowest kind in dying a criminal's death. Judgment fulfilled. And I wrote in commentary, thus, through the doorway of humanity's death, he descended into our hellish darkness. Go and read Revelation 9, verse 1, Ephesians 4, 8 to 10. Philippians 2, verse 9. From this place of utter humiliation, God exalted him to the highest rank. God graced Jesus with a name that is far above every other name. You know what does his name mean? Salvation. Yahweh is my salvation. That's what his name means. So God has given Yahweh is my salvation the name of the greatest authority, conclusive authority over the universe. Jesus is not competing with some kind of rank, some kind of idea of some God of our imagination. His throne carries the weight of his being, endorsing your redemption, your innocence, your everything that he sees in you to be his belief about you. And I quote here in my comment, Ephesians 1:20, do you want to measure the mind and the muscle of God? Consider the force which he unleashed in Jesus Christ when he raised him from the dead and forever seated him enthroned as his executive authority in the realm of the heavens. Jesus is God's right hand of power. He was raised from the deepest dungeons. This is what Isaiah wrote. Every knee shall freely bow to me in worship, and every tongue shall spontaneously speak from the same God-inspired source. So verse 11 says, so every tongue will voice and resonate the same devotion to his unquestionable lordship. 2 more minutes and I'm through. As the Redeemer of life, Jesus Christ has glorified God as the Father of creation. This is You can't be so certain about God. God's just open the debate. Let's just keep the debate open. No, Jesus is the conclusion of the debate. He brought dispute to an end. Forever. About you. Jesus is God's mind made up about you. Forever. He's not going to change his mind. He swore by himself, remember, to persuade us that every knee shall bow.
Yeah, wow.
I thank you, Jesus. And I explain further in the note how the Hebrew word yatsak can be translated to God. Anyway, thank you, Jesus. Father, I thank you for your word that rains upon us like the gentle dew and tender shoots of grass, like strong showers upon the earth. So we ascribe greatness to our God, because your work is perfect. Yes, we have forgotten what manner of people we are. We have forgotten the rock that begot us, the God who danced with us. But we've heard your call. And here we are, Father. We're a people absolutely persuaded in your persuasion over us. And we want to dance the rest of our days with you. This eternal dance. This union, this oneness that embraces this precious, fragile, hurting human race, the knowledge of their salvation. Thank you, Jesus.